Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whenever you happen to answer this incredible dialogue. And I am pleased to introduce the new Untouchables once again, but in a very important um, moment in our nation's history as we're ramping up for something that seems to be increasingly volatile as we're getting closer to the No Kings rally tomorrow and a lot of the stuff that's happening vis-a-vis the Trump administration. And we're recording this at approximately 4 p.m. Eastern, and we don't have a lot of time, and everybody is making themselves available, and these gentlemen are about as important as it gets. And I want to introduce immediately Lewis Clark from the Government Accountability Project, who's going to have to jump off this call soon in a short order. But Lewis, I wonder if I could just leave it up to you to kind of introduce what's important to you at the moment, and then I'll circle back with questions.
Well, what's important to me, of course, is saving and preserving our democracy. And each day that the task, I think, becomes harder and certainly more daunting. And I don't know, I don't know many events uh, in my lifetime that was quite as traumatic as having the commander in chief assemble the top military leadership, 800 leaders in a room, and tell them they're going to practice warfare on our city streets. It's just so beyond the pale. And so I think that we've certainly turned a very dark corner in the history of this country.
Well, as our collective sort of our initiative is rolling out. A couple of things I'd like to maybe try to get you to address before you have to jump off this call, Lewis, is that
Sure.
we're introducing to the No Kings rally around the country. I've got access to a lot of the senior key people, as well as other people in the entertainment industry and other things that we're going to try to bring as much attention to this urgent matter of how we're going to roll out what the new Untouchables can do in coordination with the Government Accountability Project. And a couple of weeks ago, for example, for those just maybe learning about this for the first time, Lewis Clark and his operation is the premier, the elite whistleblower inside the Beltway firm that represents some of the biggest stories in our nation's history. And as of a couple of weeks ago, and actually the last 6 weeks, I'd say, have been really a pipeline to the front page of the New York Times on absolutely tremendous stories that I think may have missed a lot of people's radar due to the fact that we're obviously being, I don't know, inundated with just so much information every single moment of every day that it's hard to keep track. But for example, in the midst of Epstein, in the midst of all of the things that we're familiar with, the Government Accountability Project was able to get an injunction to stop the deportation of 327 children to known sex trafficking operations in Guatemala, for example, which I believe we're also going to be another step to another 2,000 behind them, for example. So, all of that being equal, uh, if you wouldn't mind, Lewis, can you please just kind of give us an overview of the goings on of your operation right now in the context of what the nation is facing?
Well, here's exactly what happened is we didn't do it, the whistleblowers did it. The whistleblowers within the federal government had access to the database for these children and identified that a number of the children that were being expatriated to Guatemala had actually been subject to neglect, abuse, and even suspected sexual trafficking. And our government was going to send those children back to that environment. And that was absolutely against the law. And a Trump appointed judge vehemently agreed or actually picked up on our whistleblower revelations that were published in the New York Times. And that was one of the reasons he cited for issuing a preliminary injunction against the transport of those children, which they grabbed in the middle of the night, 2 and 3 in the morning, from their foster homes and their centers where they were living, and put them on airplanes by 5 and 6 in the morning, and they were traumatized, and they're all 10 to 17 years old. But that's just in one case. But what essentially is happening, I mean, is there are a number of people from the Department of Justice, from the Department of Homeland Security, who are coming forward and blowing the whistle on what's going on within those departments of government. And it's not a pretty picture, as we do here in the news.
David Kay, it is so great to have you here. I know that you are back to back, wall to wall with everything. So we're deeply appreciative of your participation here. I wonder if you could just maybe just riff on really what's top of mind for you, considering everything that's going on.
Well, the biggest thing I'm concerned about right now is if you combine the National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, which cherry picks unrelated events and suggests there's some vast conspiracy against Christianity, essentially against good people, with what the Supreme Court's doing, it's a very dark picture. The Supreme Court is in a backdoor way that has not been well explained to the public what's going on. But in essence, the court has abandoned, and those of you who are actually lawyers, please disagree with me if you think I'm wrong about this, the notion of irreparable harm, so that when a district judge, whether appointed by Donald Trump or some other president, says, yeah, the president cannot do this, he lacks authority, and a circuit court backs him up, the Supreme Court majority comes out and says, well, we should allow this litigation to continue, but in the meantime, the president can continue doing what he's been doing. And if you are a child who is taken to another country like Guatemala, if you are engaged in any of a number of other behaviors, including you've been fired from a job with no cause, that's an appointment for a set term, you suffer irreparable harm. And this is a backdoor way that the Supreme Court is helping Donald Trump's dictatorship expand and flower and fully take root. One other thing, I had two conversations today with people I randomly ran into at stores after I taught my class this morning at Rochester Institute of Technology. Both of them were people of color, and I asked them if they were going to go to the No Kings demonstrations. And one of them proceeded to tell me, all the politicians are dirty, they're all crooks. Trump is no different than any of the others. A level of cynicism which is extremely troubling to understand what's happening. And the other one simply said no, because they were afraid of what would happen to them. A person who's a natural born US citizen, but was afraid that Trump would find some way, if they went to one of these, to remove them from the country. And of course, Donald has said he wants to deport citizens. You can't deport a citizen. You can remove them, but you, by definition, can't deport a citizen. I'm very concerned that he's already intimidated a lot of people. Now, we'll see how many people show up Saturday in the various demonstrations. But if it's anything less than 20 million, it's not sufficient to have any real impact.
Yeah, agreed with that. And Paul, I just wanted to maybe get some of your insights from this perspective. I mean, we've seen Stephen Miller for the past several weeks make these menacing threats, and it's, some people want to act as if he's a cartoon villain, right? But yet we know he's the chief of staff. We know what's going on with Pam Bondi. We know that they're marking, whether legally and it's not legally, because we understand what Antifa is. But yet it's this branding of using pretty much all of these what appear to be kind of like post 9/11, I don't know, warrants and surveillance and getting inside and all of those types of things that obviously you've been in the midst of for a very long time. I'm curious if you can just kind of talk about, your threat assessment, if you will, and kind of maybe a proper sort of orientation for people's minds right now, given what you're saying. Paul, you're on silent.
In terms of threat assessment, I agree with sort of what's already been said. It's DEFCON 5 as far as I'm concerned right now. And to pick up on David Kay's point, I think most of us are young enough to remember that way back in the 50s and 60s, we had a cadre of circuit court judges, all white Southerners, Judge Brown, Judge Waring, a lot of them who rose up to enforce the civil rights laws when nobody else would. And I think what we see these judges do on the Supreme Court now is exactly the opposite. They're taking the coward's way out, and they are obviously achieving an agenda that Trump wants to, and which is the imperial presidency. So you mix that with the concept of fear that David just talked about, and the reality is when you see the vice president of the United States normalizing the cheering on of Hitler, the cheering on of rape, the cheering on of racism by these young portly Republicans in New York, you just see where this is heading, right? I mean, these people were cheering on Hitler, and the vice president of the United States normalized that. You add that to when I saw a press conference, I think it was yesterday, with all of the people, including the person you just talked about, our own version of Goering. He's talking about blowing up boats, and all of Trump's DOJ cabinet is behind him. We had the attorney general, we had the deputy attorney general, and they're laughing when he's talking about this stuff, this lawless behavior. And we're not heading in a good direction. I have no confidence the Supreme Court is going to put the brakes on it, as has already been said. And so I think what we can rely upon, at least for now, is for the district court judges and the courts of appeal to at least keep this country together and keep democracy in place. And we have to just pray that as the economy collapses around us, that the midterm elections will sort of change at least the behavior of Congress, so that we can have at least one branch of Congress, which will be a check and balance on this president. I don't see it going in a good place until that happens. And even then.
Ladies and gentlemen, you just heard from one of the top prosecutors from the Department of Justice in our nation's history. And the gravity of DEFCON 5 and what you've just laid out is something to be taken very seriously. Mark, I want to turn it to you immediately. Obviously, we just had a conversation, but hearing from your colleagues right now, what's your first orientation?
Well, I agree with them. I mean, there's look, I mean, there's clearly a plan. There's clearly a determination on the part of the folks in the administration to test the limits and to see how far they can go, and what they can get away with. And once again, we can celebrate another week of the federal judiciary holding and maintaining the rule of law and the protection of the Constitution. With the possible exception of the Supreme Court, but they held this week, to their credit, as well. And so I think we have to, this is going to be a daily fight, and it's going to go on. And we have what are we, 1/8 of the way through his term, maybe a little bit better than that. We got a lot of months and days ahead of us where we just have to be ready to mount the same fight. There's going to be a new fight every day, a new test of limits every day. This week, in my little world, the CFPB director and the budget director announced that they're going to close the CFPB down in 2 months. So they went from laying everybody off. Now they want to close it down. Well, there's not a world in which a court who reads the Constitution and statutes of this country could possibly let that happen. but it's going to have to be challenged. It's going to have to be challenged by somebody with standing to do that. Whether it might be people that use the services of the CFPB that have the standing to do that. I don't know. We're looking at that issue. But they're gonna, they started by laying off the staff to try to essentially functionally terminate the usefulness of the agency by just laying everybody off. Well, that hasn't worked completely, and now he's talking about actually shutting the doors on the place. A congressionally created and mandated federal agency. Um, so they will continue. They're going to continue to try to do audacious, ridiculous things, and we have to not let those things become normalized. We have to there's going to needs to be a fight for every single unconstitutional action.
Mr. Black, you've been awfully busy today, obviously, getting the word out of the initiative of the Fight platform that's orchestrated through your team members here, the new Untouchables. Bill, can you pick up on everything that you've heard right now and maybe introduce what you have been throughout the day?
So, sure, let me start with the technical point that David Kay brought up. What June Carbone, who's delivering a paper today in New York and can't be with us, and I did in the federal programs branch, and what I did is litigation director of a federal agency that had independent litigation authority and a docket of 10,000 cases. So we litigated directly, not through the Department of Justice. And the federal programs branch cream skims every major statutory and constitutional challenge in the district courts and handles those regardless of where in the nation they're filed, right? So what we had to become expert in particular, was the standard for injunctive relief, particularly pre-trial injunctive relief, right? Because that was a huge part of the issue. And you would always get sued in the district when where the federal program or law was most hated. So we were often in front of very hostile judges. And you had to learn the standards for this kind of preliminary relief. These are temporary restraining orders, preliminary injunctions in every circuit in the United States. And they differ a bit, right? But are generally the same. That is the battle, as Lewis explained. If you don't get the injunction, the kids are back in Honduras and they can never be protected again. They're with the child abusers. They'll be swept out of the legal system entirely. They'll never be heard of again, except perhaps with a death notice. And probably even that won't occur because it'll be anonymous, the person that died. The Supreme Court, in the so-called shadow docket, that is what it is doing. It is playing fast and loose with all the normal standards for preliminary relief. And in particular, what it's doing is getting rid of the need for irreparable injury to support the government's ability to move forward. So they're saying, well, simply not allowing the president to do what he wants constitutes some kind of irreparable injury. Because after all, he's the president and he wants to do it. That is a complete abrogation of the law. And slightly different than Mark's view, there's been a recent article where the major paper talked to federal district judges and magistrates, and they are furious, absolutely furious, because they know the Supreme Court is no longer a court. Now, it is on some arcane commercial issues, right? But on the big issues that we're talking about saving people, saving democracy, it is no longer a true court. And any long-term remedy has to involve the restoration of the rule of law. And that means taking on the Supreme Court, which has been broken by the Senate Majority Leader, Republican Majority Leader's abuse of the process of nominations selectively, and by a whole course of perjury by the people who took the positions as Supreme Court justice, where they swore they weren't going to do the very things that they've done. So there's that. As for fighting back, as Mark said, it's well past 1/8, right? And there has not been a single case that I know of where states have worked together with the whistleblowers, even though there are numerous states. There are 15 with the trifecta, according to the Invincible. I'm sorry, well, it's not Invincible. What's the
Indivisible?
Indivisible program, right? And the Indivisible program, correctly, the guide says, hey, folks, you need to tell stories, not give a bunch of statistics. Humans learn through stories, through narrative. People they can identify with, who they recognize have moral courage and are truth tellers. And if on top of that they also have expertise, great. And if they have the underlying documents, great. And if we don't come out immediately with the documents and the senior government officials lie, and then we present the documents, even better, great. And we know how paranoid this administration is at anybody that tells the truth. And they feel surrounded by people who are grave dangers because they're potential whistleblowers, who would tell the truth and have the facts. Senior whistleblowers are a unique treasure, not because they're senior, but because they know more, right? They were in the key conversations directly. Imagine some of these flaky prosecutions where the senior Justice Department official is going to lie in court and bringing out a whistleblower who can say, no, that person lied. A, they'll lose the case, they being the Department of Justice in these flaky prosecutions, but B, they can lose their bar license. And C, they can be exposed to the world that you can't believe anything this administration says. And that will cause retribution of all kinds, right? This is a difficult thing for us whistleblowers, but absolutely essential for the country, right? We have to be fighting back. So I looked at the Indivisible thing. There's no mention of robber barons. There are two sort of, weak things about billionaires, but nothing about analytics or controlling elections and such. There's one reference to unions, one. And it's about maybe helping somebody in a teachers union who's being knocked out for, helping a person who's gay, that type of thing. But the idea of looking for allies in constituencies that the Democrats once were major forces in, and that maybe we ought to redo that, revitalize that. This doesn't exist. The whole idea is to hold on for 2 years and maybe win the House, which the Supreme Court, on the basis of oral argument, is indicating that they're going to basically cause every black politician elected a federal official in the United States in the South, in what used to be the Confederacy, is likely to be redistricted out of existence. Right? And that the Supreme Court will be fine with that. So there's no certainty that you're going to win the House back in 2 years. And again, if you have whistleblowers coming forward with the scandals, the chances of winning in a midterm go up dramatically. So we are much too passive. This strategy of cowering for 2 years, and maybe doing a tiny bit of counterpunching, is a failed strategy from the beginning. We need to be leading with the truth. We need to be leading with the heroes, and they are the whistleblowers.
Patrick, if I can pick up on Bill's point right there, there's this map everybody has probably seen at this point. Southern states, here are the districts that have a black member of Congress and what is likely to occur after redistricting. And it's been presented as, despair for anybody who doesn't believe in the Trump agenda. I don't see it that way. It's opportunity. You take lemons and make lemonade. Donald Trump is increasingly unpopular. His popularity is below 40%. He got 49.5% of the vote in the election. What would be more humiliating than you can possibly imagine for Donald Trump is to win in these redistricted locations. Now, there was a saying we had when I worked at the LA Times, Goya Cod, get off your ass, knock on doors. And to win this election, we have to overcome the cynicism of people like the man I talked with at the store today. All politicians are terrible. It doesn't matter who they are. The Democrats have to stop being in the thrall of these consultants. There's lots of political science research that TV ads move the meter about 0.3 of 1 percentage point. It's an inefficient use of money that enriches these guys. We need to spend money having people go door to door and go door to door again and get people registered, make sure they stay registered, but most importantly, getting them to the polls on election day. And we need to work very much on getting them to the polls because Trump is now apparently moving on the postal service. One of the things I taught my law students this week is that the Congress is authorized under the Constitution to create a post office. It is not required to do so. It's just like bankruptcy law. You're authorized to have a bankruptcy law. You are not required to pass one. And so it'll be a lot of work and effort, but with popular support and effort at very low cost, I think that he is so unpopular, and as the economy slides, it's going to be so much more unpopular that the Democrats, even with redistricting, can gain seats and get control of the House, and maybe by a significant margin. But let's not get rid of this despair. Oh, all is lost. We're crossing the river Styx. Nonsense. This is opportunity, and we should see it as opportunity, and we should have a very positive view about we're going to really show how much Donald Trump and his dictatorship is out of line with the values of Americans.
And let me make a friendly add-on to that. What they're going to do is going to be creating more slightly red districts.
Yeah.
And so if we get 8-point swings, 9-point swings, this could backfire badly. They could lose by 1%, 20% more districts.
Yeah.
Right. Before we lose Louis, I'd like you to respond, Louis, to what you've heard so far. And I know you've probably got to bail out now, but just in case you have a minute or so.
Well, I have 30 seconds just to say is that we're not involved in electoral politics at the Government Accountability Project because we're very extremely or exceedingly nonpartisan, as whistleblowers tend to be as well. But the fact of the matter is what Bill was saying. I definitely agree. Is telling stories is really where it's at. Having people who are standing up, courageously standing up, seeing them and raising them up as the heroes that they are is also an effective strategy going forward in terms of having obviously having the American people realize that the truth tellers are the people who essentially they should listen to, and not disinformation 24/7 from essentially this administration. And I'm sorry I had to leave, but I love this panel and carry on, everyone.
Thanks,
and bless you for your work.
We
Thank
deeply
you.
appreciate your sentiments today, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. We'll be in touch. And Eric, I'm going to turn it to you, but I want to just a quick comment on the gentleman to my upper right, David K. Johnson. For folks who are just tuning in for the first time, because we are growing this audience pretty rapidly, is literally the single most hated journalist by Donald Trump that exists in the country. A gentleman who's been writing and revealing all things Donald Trump for decades and tirelessly allowing us to understand his perspective and all things really what's going on. So thank you. I just wanted to say that, but I want to turn this to you real quick. Eric. Eric is my colleague. We've worked together forever. He's also a independent journalist and an independent producer and investigative journalist, deeply enmeshed in ferreting out corruption in every capacity that he can. But we've been on this journey for a long time, Eric. And you and I, by the way, during our first run, our first film together, Forward 13, Waking Up the American Dream, we found ourselves on K Street and none other than defensive democracies. And as you may recall, we had an interview with none other than a gentleman by the name of Sebastian Gorka. Now, at that time period, we were a little bit befuddled. I'm just going to give my 2 cents, and then I want to kind of get your sense of this, because what obviously Lewis just said, and what we all know, we have to tell the stories. That's where you and I come in. We're going to tell these stories, and we're going to tell these stories, hopefully at the level that we've done so far, and the reason why the greatest amongst us from our legal profession gives us their trust, and we continue to carry that forward. But Sebastian Gorka sat in front of us and told us some very interesting things at the time that, as you may recall, I reacted in a very peculiar way because I was like, who is this guy representing? What are we talking about? And then we've seen since then, because we recorded that in 2012. Mm-hmm. We've gone forward to where now Sebastian Gorka is President Trump's, I believe, czar on terrorism, right? And so we've just seen Stephen Miller, Pam Bondi, Mike Johnson, and on down the line, especially Donald Trump, in this absurd sort of routine, providing this sort of everybody who's going to come out to No Kings is a terrorist. They support Hamas, that they are these people that we know that guys like Sebastian Gorka saw, in the 70s and the 80s, and the rock floors and the rock throwers in the West Bank and they've maneuvered that scenario to become the American people who are literally anti-fascist, which any of us all know was the entire purpose of the United States. No kings, no dictators. And we've spent our entire history in what you and I do is in service to that. I wonder if you can maybe share your thoughts, given all that's going on, especially because we literally we're face to face. And I know he knows who we are and what that means.
Well, I think the way that I want to respond to that is to talk about what we're seeing today. I continue to be tremendously edified by how the American people are meeting the ridiculousness of this government with ridiculousness, with humor, with ridicule. I mean, I think that that is the exact right way to do this. I mean, I think that the solidarity that we see on the streets, the peaceful solidarity that we see on the streets in Chicago, we see, the inflatable costume, people in Portland, and that's because, I mean, it's like you go on websites and you can't get inflatable costumes anywhere because they're all being sold out. And I think that being able to juxtapose, these militarized, police, whatever you want to call like most of these ICE people, with just the utter ridiculousness of people in giraffe suits and frog costumes and stuff like that. I think it it seems bizarre, it seems weird, but it makes me so proud of the people, the regular people, the people that I consider myself, very much a part of, that they are meeting this without violence, without making things worse, but instead turning that energy back on this administration and the different departments and government entities that were created out of somewhat out of thin air in order to basically manhandle and rough up the American people. And so I'm really excited about that, and I hope that tomorrow we see a lot more of that. I hope we see 20 million people in goofy giraffe costumes. standing in front of people with machine guns. I think that that would be the exact right message to be sent to Washington. But I think that whatever happens, it has to happen soon. When I think about the Admiral Halsey, who just stepped down, from because of what's going on with Venezuela, right after this last boat was attacked and a couple people were saved. Evidently, the first boat, I think that people did survive. I think it's not hard to imagine why he left. He doesn't want to be a war criminal, right? He doesn't want to have to disobey an order. And so I think that there are still plenty of good people in government, but the longer this goes on, the fewer and fewer they will be. I can understand why he stepped down. It'd be great if a person of his apparent, moral fortitude remained, in the military, but I understand the situation that he's most likely in. Um, but the longer this goes on, the more of these people, the right people, the good people in government, are going to be pushed out. And so we have to act fast.
Okay, look, I'm going to make this really quick because I want to get to everybody else, but I have to respond to that because I love satire as much as the next guy. I'm like Lieutenant Drummond from, I got a sense of humor like our friend Paul Peltier down there. I want to be the guy that's, in front of the meme that says, nothing to see here with the world exploding behind us. Great. I get that. I came up with National Lampoon, for example, right? Monty Python's Flying Circus. I love satire. But that's not a movement that needs to happen with what we're talking about. You and I both know that as well, and you're not saying it's not. I'm just parsing that to get to the next step because I asked you a specific question about our encounter with Sebastian Gorka. What was your takeaway from that moment, all this many years forward, and thinking about that's who's literally in the command posts that's in charge of this? That's what they're doing. I mean, Sebastian Gorka is a
Gorka
part of
came
the network.
from the conservative group in Hungary, which is basically Nazis, right?
Yep.
I don't know if we knew that at the time, but it was something that became
We didn't
apparent
know it as
very
well as we did
quickly.
many years later, right?
Right. But that's where he comes from. And so basically we have a person who has Nazi bona fides in his past, uh, instructing the government about how to handle terrorism. So that tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah. Okay, back to just real quick, Mark, if you don't mind responding, just because we talked about that briefly, if you
Yeah.
could maybe.
Yeah, look, I do think we don't want to. We need to have a message of action that comes out of these hearings tomorrow, not just an argument, or not just a good anecdote about a Halloween costume for people. And I think that message has to be that it's everybody's responsibility to take action when there is a violation of the Constitution or the rule of law. That applies to office holders, and that the public has a duty to hold that. Forget about the administration; they're not going to respond to those of us that attend the rally tomorrow. But the local prosecutor, when there's a kidnapping on the street of your town, the mayor, when a housing program gets terminated because it benefits people of color, the state attorney general and the state governor, when there's a threat of troops being deployed into the state, or when they're trying to mobilize your state's National Guard to do unconstitutional duties. We need to hold our local and state elected officials accountable to take action 100% of the time. If your constitutional rights violated, it's your job to call a lawyer. If it's your lawyer, it's your job. It's your job to answer those calls, and to bring those cases, or to find a lawyer that has some experience in bringing civil rights cases under federal law, that where there's fee shifting, where there's an opportunity to actually not just do something that's right for the country, but also get paid to do it. We did that this week. I mean, again, no fight needs, and I think what we come away from this is that yes, let's have great memes, and let's be as pithy on on social media as the other side is. If we just did that, it might be, who knows, that might be enough. But if we come out of this with a plan, I mean, so the Ashland County Democratic Party had a booth at the Ashland County Fair, as they do every year. At the booth, they had on display buttons that had hats that looked like MAGA hats, but they had anti-Trump slogans on them. The county sheriff came to the booth, confiscated those buttons from the Ashland County Democrats, and then the fair board removed them from the fair and told them they could no longer. Now, every year of the Ashland County Fair, which has gone on for 100+ years, the county Democratic parties had a booth. The County Republican Party has a booth. The Libertarian Party could have a booth if they wanted to have it at the Ashland County Fair. County fairs are a great tradition in Ohio. I'm having run for office statewide. I can have been to more county fairs than I would like to tell you about. More than I ever would want to go to in my lifetime. But they're a great tradition, and part of that tradition is unfettered political discourse and dialogue. And the booths for the political parties provide that. Well, the fair board voted them off the island and forced them to leave. And so we brought suit. We sued the sheriff. We sued the fair board, the Agricultural Society of Ashland County, for violating the Ashland County Democratic Committee's constitutional right to free speech. There's no speech in under our Constitution that's more protected than political speech, and more sacred, and more important to the process. So it's a little fight, but it's our fight. It's our fight this week. And so what we have to understand is, unlike some of the supporters of the Weimar Republic in Germany, everybody's fight is all of our fight. And the Ashland County Democratic Party's fight is going to have to be our fight today. And if it happens tomorrow at the Gallia County Fair, in Gallipolis, then we have to do it again. Or maybe by bringing this suit, we'll stop it from happening at the next fair.
Mark, can I pick up on your point and suggest something where, in fact, I think you can collect a lot of fees and do a lot of good at the same time? The Trump administration has been inserting into grants. The only one I actually have a copy of is a FEMA grant, but I'm sure that it is not unique, saying that in return for this grant, which was $69,000 to Urbana, Illinois, which is a little dot full of scientists and academics 2 hours outside Chicago, that you must end all DEI, that you must help ICE in every way that you're asked to do, and you may not run, and this is the killer one in my view, any program of any kind which in any way helps any person who is in the country illegally. Well, essentially, there's no way to do that. I mean, you're running a roads program and people use them. And they apparently are inserting these in every contract. The standing issue has been a big problem. The emoluments clause, the courts basically said, you don't have standing. We found that with some other clauses, including Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, that you cannot hold any office of profit or trust if you have given aid or comfort to an insurrection or an invasion. And that kind of lawsuit strikes me as, yes, it's just about getting some money, but it could go right to the heart of this. And I can't imagine even this Supreme Court saying, yeah, you can be forced to embrace this contract term. Now, I haven't read the authorizing statute for FEMA, but I doubt it has any language at all that says we can add all these other provisions. And so we do need, much as I detest litigation, even though I teach law, I detest litigation. We need to have thought out, coordinated, multi-state litigation over some of these national issues where their overreach is so far beyond anything that could possibly be tenable, even to the 6 members of the Supreme Court majority. So I hope that you and Paul and Bill, if you want to be an advisor to people, come up with the kinds of strategies Bill did during the savings and loan crisis that led to those close to 1,000 senior banking executives going to jail.
Yeah, no, I welcome the opportunity, and and look, every time you get a decision, it helps. Every time that judge in Portland, slams her, that Trump appointed, I love to remind him,
Yes.
Trump appointed judge in Portland slams her gavel down, and calls the actions of of somebody unconstitutional. It's a victory for the country, and it's a victory for all of us. And but some people don't even know what to do. They're kind of frozen in fear and anxiety over all this. And I don't know if there it would be the university that has standing, or the individual professor has standing, but we can figure that out. I mean, and look, there are worse things to bring a lawsuit and lose, as long as you do it in good faith, and as long as you tell the truth. And
So
let me go ahead, David.
I've got to get off, so I just want to make one other point. Patrick Sullivan, the very excellent trial lawyer who represents James Comey, and the other lawyers who will represent Bolton and Letitia James and others, are all going to bring vindictive prosecution complaints. We've been targeted. This violates Bill of Attainder, et cetera. And those usually fail. My hope is that the judges overseeing those cases do not grant the motions. Instead, I hope that what they say is, well, you certainly have brought a colorable argument, so I'm ordering discovery and granting very broad subpoena power to the lawyers representing people like James Comey, so that Pam Bondi and the Lindsay Halligan and even Donald Trump are forced to testify under oath to make a record of was this or was this not a revenge prosecution. So I really hope that the judges say we need more.
The judge in Tennessee in the Abrego Garcia case did just that.
Yes.
And I believe that all of these judges and all of the defense attorneys will ask for discovery, because they're going to need to develop the factual record to show vindictive prosecution. That's the only way you can do it. And I think that that's going to happen in every one of those cases.
I sure hope so, because summary dismissal on the claim, which is more than colorable, would not do anything to benefit stopping this. So anyway, I'm sorry I got to run, folks, but I'm glad we got together for a while.
Thank you so much for your time, David K.
Thank you.
Paul, I want to follow up with, I had an amazing conversation last Sunday with David Enrich of the New York Times. And he is now the deputy investigator, which let's add him to the new Untouchables list here, of the New York Times. And he was business editor before that. And of course, he's done some tremendous books on all things your expertise, right? But what was really fascinating, and I want to get your thoughts on this as we roll into No Kings, and really some of the things that I think that a lot of people speculate is all of this offensive, chicanery of, this ridiculous, calling Americans terrorists for, standing up for America sort of thing, and so on. I could go on and on, but what is at the heart of the conversation I had with David Enrich was Chase's role, JP Morgan Chase's role with managing all measure of shape of Epstein, banking, whatever, in terms of getting money to obviously people that were in the food chain and everything else that it did. Over $1 billion over the course of, I believe, 15 years, maybe, right? And in that time period, of course, the big question that we were discussing was Jamie Dimon as the CEO and all of these things that were, part of the story because of his second in command, let's call him as lieutenant, somebody who was, I hate to use the term in this analogy, groomed to become the CEO of Chase. While at that time, Jamie Dimon was apparently maybe being considered as Treasury Secretary for the Obama administration, and all of the elements that are involved with that. But over the course of the last several weeks, we've seen Representative Raskin, as well as Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, of course, of Kentucky. But I believe I might be missing. Oh, I know. Ron Wyden, Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon, all asking questions and I'm saying this for the audience first, and then I look forward to getting this question hopefully right for you. But what David Enrich gave me was what they're looking for. Honestly, they're looking for the answers that David Enrich already has about, this letter that they're writing to all of the CEOs of these, mega, financial institutions, the largest ones in the United States, specifically Jamie Dimon. And when you look back at that, given the suspicious activity reports and those things that you and your office have, dealt with at a high level for so long, can you kind of give me I don't know, paint a portrait, if you will, of how you're looking at this sort of thing through the rearview mirror, especially because, and this is one of the big things that I asked him, all of this was happening with Epstein and Staley, and by the way, the general counsel, whose name eludes me at the moment, who should have had a lot of this information. I guess that's part of my question to you, but it was all happening right during the 2008 great financial crisis, which I found very fascinating as well. Can you, I don't know, extract something out of that useful?
Well, I think that, I think that we've had this discussion a number of times, and I think that in order to get at that problem, you need a working Department of Justice, which we don't have right now. So, I mean, clearly, the banks have been the big banks have been the problem for a long time, and they've never been held to account, and they are consider themselves too big to fail. So the way I see it is, first of all, this Department of Justice is not going to do anything. You have to have state AGs doing their jobs in terms of following the money to the extent that that's relevant. But what I see as the bigger problem is CEOs of financial institutions aren't speaking out about what Trump is doing and this sort of fascist regime that he's putting in place. And remember, they're all going to suffer if this happens. We've already seen what's happening in the stock market today, doing as a result of what the perception is there of the overextension of credit and the banks that are probably more on the rocks than they've let on to. Of course, I watched Trump today, and they said, well, that's because Biden didn't regulate the banks correctly, which may or not be true. But these people want to regulate the banks appropriately. So the reality is, I think as the market continues to crumble, as Trump tries to take control of the Fed and have them do his bidding, I pray and I hope, I don't know if this is possible, that the Jamie Dimons of the world will recognize that it's probably not going to happen, but recognize that they're next on the chopping block. They're next on the chopping block, and their financial institution is likely to suffer, or someone's gonna. But I think at this stage, state attorney generals are the only ones that can sort of attack some of those issues as it relates to corruption. I mean, we could talk about this for 5 days straight, and it's a huge problem.
Well, Bill, let's give
I see Bill had a little bit of a reaction to what I said.
Well, Bill, if you wouldn't mind maybe giving us a closing comment, because again, starting at the beginning, what you've been doing all day, and thank you for doing it, is that we have a plan in place that's exactly what Paul actually just, teed up, right? Can you take that from now, go ahead.
So I think I'll say a number of things that Paul is likely to agree with. First, had there been the appropriate prosecutions coming from the great financial crisis, and instead there were none of the elite CEOs, you would have gotten all kinds of collateral benefits, because the first thing you do as a defense counsel is say, what can you give them? The prosecutor, right? And so they know all kinds of other scandals, including the Epstein scandal and such. And they go, I can give you this guy and such. And that doesn't happen unless you actually do the prosecutions. And it also happens easier when you do the prosecutions, because the more convictions you get, the more eager defense counsel is to woodshed the client and said, now is the time to tell me, because otherwise your life is going to be for shit, type of thing. That come to Jesus thing never happened in 2008. Second, the idea that we're going to be saved by Jamie Dimon types who will develop courage and a moral backbone. No. What they will always be hoping for is two things. One is Churchill's old thing about appeasement, the hopes that if you feed everybody else to the crocodile, it'll be full. You know? That's what the bankers would do, type of thing. And the second thing is you're missing that you can still make an enormous amount of money as a bank CEO in a bear market. All you got to know is timing. And so if Trump will tell the insiders who are actually the ones, with the puppet strings, that the crypto is going to do this on this day, right? We're going to buy crypto tomorrow at 11. Well, you front run it, right? And you make a fortune. Or that we're going to bring an action against these folks who don't like because they're not bribing us. And that we're going to announce that at 2:30 p.m. at the Justice Department. Well, you front run at 11:30 and short that stock. So these guys are not threatened by a stock downturn in the way that you would normally think of rich investors, because they think they can profit from volatility. Indeed, they think the more volatility, the better in terms of their ability to profit if they're an insider. And therefore, they're going to be even more wedded to Trump, the more desperate they get.
We could talk about crypto and everything else, but just the final comment there in terms of the state legislatures, subpoena power.
So the way to fight back is not to wait for any federal midterms, right now. All right. So if you like, Pritzker and Newsom fight back, make it substantive as well. I love the trolling. Do both. Do the trolling, but if either Pritzker or Newsom called on their contacts and said, why aren't we holding hearings in the California Assembly, the California Senate, the Illinois Senate, the Illinois House? Those things would happen, and potentially they would happen Tuesday.
And I'm holding a fundraiser for Spanberger with another hosting a fundraiser for her this week, and I am going to give her an ear douche in front of everybody about just that, Bill. About just that. Performative, yes, but we also do substantive things too. She's going to win. But I want to humiliate her publicly about what she needs to do. She'll do it. She's terrific. She's terrific.
Yeah, somebody needs to talk to Newsom about that veto he did. That was a travesty. The AI veto, the AI regulation veto. That was just he went the exact opposite.
Yeah, well, maybe he's grown some gonads over the past 6 months.
I'm not hiding the fact that by saying that you also no kings isn't sufficient. It's got to be no robber barons.
Mm-hmm.
Is because a bunch of these folks, they're going to trade one set of robber barons for another set of robber barons, and
Yep.
That is not a fix.
Well, the fix is the new Untouchables given DEFCON 5. And thank you to you all. Anybody want to add anything else before we depart?
No,
Anyone?
thank you.
Anyone
Thanks,
closing?
Patrick.
Okay. No, thank you. And guys, if you are animated to do something for your country, will you please share this? Will you please like? Will you please subscribe? Will you please get this to everyone you know who's going to the No Kings rally? Let everybody know that we have a plan in play that's, as much as I love bouncing dinosaurs and Kenny from South Park blowing bubbles in Ice's face, which is incredibly courageous and innovative, we've got the new Untouchables who know how the system works, and we can turn the tables on this monstrous betrayal to our country. So on behalf of everyone, my name is Patrick Lovell signing off for now. Onwards and upwards. All the best to you all. We'll talk soon.